So for the next presentation, we have Bruce Cronquist and Todd Stone from Dell Technologies in Seattle. And so both of them will be telling us about how Dell's Modernized Learning Initiative has reimagined the learning experience for training processes. So I'll leave you two to it.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks for your help, Christine. So yeah, you'll see two links that I've gone ahead and pasted into chat, and they're up on screen for anyone there in person. The first one is the actual toolkit. It's a handout or job aid you can go ahead and take with you, but we'll be talking about it in about 5 or 6 slides. But also the second link is a survey we'd like you to go ahead and fill out. And if you can do that sometime during the presentation, and we'll go over the results at the end. But if you want to look at the presentation, oops, there we go. Actually, can't go and pull it up. That's fine. We'll hide that toolbar. So yeah, we'll go ahead and, are you ready, Todd?
Yep.
Ready to kick this off? Great. So thanks everyone for showing up. This is Modernized Learning here at Dell. Give you a little bit of history. So I'm Bruce Cronquist. The other person on the camera is Todd Stone, my cohort in crime. You probably read our bios, so we won't go back over them. But the main thing to take away from them is that both Todd and I are part of the transformation of the learning, design, and development here at Dell Technologies. We're senior learning consultants, and we help oversee the pilots and projects in the Education Services Department for our Education Services employees. And if you're not familiar with Dell, well, we love data. Here's a few numbers for you. If you look at your laptop, our data says there's about a 30% chance that Dell's name is on it. That proves that, depending on how old you are, that not everyone got a Dell. I think our marketing department will have to do something about that. If you look at the number of Dell employees, there's about 133,000 of them. There's about 650 of us in the Education Services Department. So that breaks down to about 105 employees per Education Services employee. But we actually work as a bunch of small agile teams with one program manager, one product owner, and a couple of developers. So we're actually a whole bunch of hundreds of small L&D teams. And if you've ever heard about the number 9,000, our education services is actually ISO 9000 certified for training, which I thought was kind of cool. I'd never heard of that until I started here at Dell. So Todd, what do you have to add?
So to add to that, I just say, yeah, our organization is called Dell Technologies Education Services. Bruce was saying we have 205 employees. The current teams that we're working with, we have like 12 different training teams. And these teams create training, technical training for like our support teams. So if you call into our call center and speak to one of our support technicians, that's training for them. It's field technicians if any of our technicians are going out to fix stuff out in the field, and also our system engineers that are helping clients, customers set up their systems. The trainings usually include setup. We call these rack and stack trainings, where our service engineers are going in and setting up servers. Also administration training, so how to administer those servers. We also do performance tuning, making those servers perform better, and then also troubleshooting. So if anything goes wrong, how to fix that. All right, so let's look at some of the history. So just give you some context, we merged, Dell and EMC merged in 2015, so we all got Dells. We needed to, when we made this merger, we had these two separate training organizations that were coming together. So we really needed to clean house. And what we did is we looked at the trainings that both teams had, the different trainings. We identified things that we were doing well. We also found a lot of things that we weren't doing well and where we could improve. We also needed to know our new audiences, this new organization. So we conducted interviews to really learn about our audience, learn what their needs were, what their learning needs were, what they liked, what they didn't like. What we found out, just a few of the things we found out were a lot of our customers wanted shorter trainings. They didn't like these big, long trainings. They wanted something that could fit within their daily workflow. We also found out a lot of our customers couldn't afford to take their employees off the floor and send them to these long, multi-day trainings, sometimes weeks at a time, in-person training. So they wanted more online and more flexibility in how they were able to consume the training. Within all this, we were also looking at how to create high-functioning teams because we had our team, all these teams that were coming together and merging. So we really needed to figure out how we could work together and be high-functioning. So we did a employee skills inventory. So we just looked at everyone's skills and found out what we all had as a group. We also looked at breaking down development silos because within both of our organizations, our development teams would work as these small individual teams. But what we found is a lot of times these teams were doing repetitive work or doing the same work that other teams were doing. So we were looking at how we could break down those silos. We also looked at investing in new tools that could help us with collaboration and with developing in a collaborative environment. And then we got rid of old tools that didn't serve our needs anymore. We also moved more toward, or not more, but we moved fully into an agile project management structure. So we had been doing waterfall project management. This way with agile, it just let us, as the name implies, be more agile and be able to move quicker. We also were doing all this with an eye towards the future. We were looking at how we could take our new training organization and make that a training organization of the future. Also, how this could benefit our customers. So the first thing we did was we met in Minnesota in balmy January. And we met and we just brainstormed. We thought about like, what does a learning organization of the future look like? And just threw out ideas and did a lot of planning. When we were doing this, we were focusing a lot of our planning was around, well, it was based on adult learning theory. So we were looking at David Kolb's experiential learning theory. We were looking at Malcolm Knowles' principles of andragogy. We looked at Edgar Dale's cone of experience. And we also looked at James Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of training evaluation. So once we did all this brainstorming, got ideas out there, we made a plan of what it was going to look like for that training organization of the future. We then broke down into smaller sub-teams, and we had a process development team. So this team was one that came together and developed this process. We also developed a lot of templates and the documentation we would use to develop training in this new way. We also had process training teams. So we had our own internal teams we had to train to go train our employees across Dell. And then we identified pilot teams. So pilots were really big in this because we didn't want to just go and launch to the larger organization. So we looked at small little teams where we could test out new things, see if things worked or didn't work. The benefit was that by testing out with all these different teams, we got a bunch of different ideas from these teams of how things worked and how they didn't work. The downside was everyone sort of did things a little differently. And so as far as the quality and the standardization, that suffered, and it's been something that we've had to come back to and look at. All right. So what is modernized learning? Let's see. So we had 4 different pillars when we did this. The first one, topic-based learning. Next one, experiential, personalized, and next generation curation. And I'll go into more details in these separate pillars in the presentation. But right now, I'll just give you an overview of what these were. So topic-based learning was about creating smaller courses. We heard that our customers didn't have time for these large, big courses. So we looked at how we could make them smaller, cut out a lot of the bloated content, and really focus on what learners need to do versus what they need to know. We also were looking at a modularized development process where sort of like a box of Legos. You could have a small little course that focused on one small little topic, but then you could add these topics together to create a larger, more encompassing course, and then also be able to search for those different topics in a searchable library. Another thing that we did is we looked at how this could shorten our release cadence for training. We're always having to do training on new products as they update and come out. So one of the goals as a high-functioning team is how we could develop faster and get that information out to our customers in a quicker manner. So this micro-learning really helped us make smaller courses. It helped us have a predictable cadence, which also helps with resource planning across our different teams. Then we also looked at experiential, really looking at the work that David Kolb has done around experiential learning. We were looking at how to create more hands-on, more learning activities that focused on doing versus just the knowledge or the knowing of the information. We also create a library of experiential learning activities. So our developers could go to this library based on what they were trying to do, the skills they were trying to teach in the course. They could search through this library of different activities. And this is a library that also developers could add to. So it created this community and bubbled up a lot of great activities that our different development teams could use across Dell. We also were looking at augmented reality and like extended reality technologies. So like VR, AR, 3D simulations. We were really looking at how we could take that experiential piece and transition it to online. So in a remote environment, people could still get that sort of hands-on activity or that active learning. We also looked at personalized learning. So we were looking at how we could, instead of throwing everything at the learner, we wanted to make it more personalized and more strategic. So we identified, first we looked at how our learners internally were learning. And we saw that a lot of them, they weren't taking our training that we had created. They were actually going out to YouTube or Google and finding white papers on different stuff to meet their learning needs. So we identified this as informal learning. And then we created a system, or the system we used was Edcast. And so we built this platform where we could curate all these different informal learning resources and bring them together and let our employees share these resources with others and create their own learning paths based on some of the resources they've been able to curate. We also looked at skill-based assessment. And so this was within the training that we developed. We looked at how could we let learners skip past some of the content that they already know and not have to sit through a long training, but be able to take an assessment up front and then based on the results of that assessment, be able to skip to the points in the training that they still needed to learn. This also helped us with just internally with our organization. We assessed all the skills of our employees and we looked at where there were opportunities where if someone assessed and rated themselves really high on a skill, maybe they could serve as a mentor or coach for some other employees that maybe rated themselves lower. It also helped our managers identify where we needed to upskill our development teams. Then the final one was next generation curation. So the whole idea around this was instead of creating content from scratch every time, look at what we could reuse that maybe we created in some other courses, be able to reuse that content and also be able to curate content from other resources, outside resources, and use that instead of creating a whole new training. The whole idea was to just reduce the time that the development teams would need to create these trainings.
Awesome, thanks. Let's take a look at actually some of specific examples of each of the pillars. So remember the first pillar of modernized learning is topic-based learning, or TBL for short. And it has been the foundation that's helped us modernize our learnings. Simple steps are you take all the content, divide it in the need to know and the nice to know, prioritize the need to know, and then just teach the need to know. We can show the learner where and how to find the nice to know information. An example might be driving your car. How to brake the car is a need to know, but changing the flat tire, that's a nice to know. The user can go look up a video on YouTube or read the user's manual, either way. So topic-based learning has let us shift into smaller task-based trainings. So what you see on the screen here is a tool-based training called Ingenious. And if you look, here's the original topic or the original course. It was 48 topics over 51 pages. It took about an hour and a half to 2 hours to complete. CSAT, or the satisfaction number, was an 84%. Well, our goal is 95%. So we were not meeting our own internal CSAT numbers. The course is bloated, didn't work well on a mobile device, and also didn't meet the Dell branding guidelines in terms of colors, accessibilities, and things like that. This is the old course. Let's take a look what the new course looks like. Here's what the new course looks like after applying TBL to it. So it's now just 16 topics over just 25 pages. So the course is shorter. We have only the topics that are immediately applicable by the call center agent. It's easier for the learners to consume when they happen to have some time. For example, a couple of minutes between support calls, they can take just one of these modules. And then they can also take it at the time of need, such as, when, for example, when they are taking receiving an inbound call and they're not quite sure how to do a warm transfer, they can look that up really quickly in the training and then carry out that action. It's also nice that it works on a mobile device. So a lot of our agents have the phones, their own personal phones next to them. They can go and take the training on that while working on their laptop with the customer. The CSAT has also started climbing from the older, as all the old lower evaluation numbers start falling outside of our reporting range. And we're trending towards about 92%. So we still need to make a few changes to the training, but it is heading in the right direction. So besides creating smaller reusable topics, the bonus is that we can actually iteratively release smaller learning objects for the learner. So we don't have to release the whole training at once. We can start releasing the modules one at a time. It's nice because this gets the content to the learner sooner. We can start achieving some measurable improvements in the learner's job versus waiting months or even a year for some of the larger projects that we are trying to create. We can also get feedback sooner. If you're familiar with Agile, it's a retrospective. We can learn about our mistakes sooner, and if we aren't on the right track, learners are definitely going to let us know, and we can make those changes. So the learners aren't the only ones who benefit. The stakeholders also benefit because we can now show them something and show that progress, saying, here's the first module, here's the second module, and we can show that we're starting to deliver on our commitments. For the Education Services Department ourselves, another bonus of TBL is the reusable learning objects, as Todd had mentioned. We can create these objects and reuse them throughout multiple courses as needed. Again, think about Lego bricks trying to build a wall. The learner can take a single brick or a topic of learning, or can assemble multiple of these topics into larger multi-topic trainings. In our earlier car example, braking applies to all cars and trucks and can be reused in training whether you're training a commuter or race car driver. But in the case of this training, the receiving an inbound call, that module is here in the tool training, but it's also available in the how to do your day-to-day job course. There's a bit.ly link at the bottom of the screen, and I've also gone and pasted it in the chat. And that's a paper that Todd and I have published that goes into a lot more detail into TBL. So if you're interested in it, feel free to go ahead and take a look at that. So the second pillar of the modernized learning is experiential. And again, as Todd had mentioned, it's based on data we use here inside of Dell. But HappyAct, it sits over videos and allows you to do simple branching, unscored assessments, and things like that. The next one, there we go. So if you go ahead and open up the toolkit, the link that I pasted earlier, and that's for you to go ahead and take home. That's the actual experiential learning toolkit that we use here at Dell that we've handed out to developers. And mentioned earlier, experiential learning is a collection of activities that allow the learner to practice what they're learning. In here, you'll see the actual 8 activities that have been approved by our governance board, more on that in a little bit, and that work in all the development tools that we have here at Dell that work on our LCMS and LMS. So experiential, our practice activity, it has to be part of every learning module and every course that we go ahead and produce these days. That's a requirement. If you look at the toolkit, you'll see the rows are all the different possibilities, the interactive video, case studies, flashcards, and so on. Each of the columns in it represent, what it is, what skill, or we call it standard offering components that it works for best, how to use it, which tools, governance information, and a thing we call effort and value. And what that is the effort is how hard it is to create this object, and also what is the value of it? How valuable is it going to be to the learner? Also, it doesn't show here, but in the handout, you'll see that we have columns for directions for virtual classroom instructors and also instructor-led classrooms, if these are being done at that time. If you want to see it, kind of look at one in a little bit more detail, here's what's called a scavenger hunt. and how to go about using it, example, and the effort value. That video demo I shared earlier was actually a scavenger hunt. It's helping the service engineer how to find that information in the document that's attached to the training. It's the exact same form that the service engineer will use in the field when setting up their customer's storage device. Now, we are limited. If you notice, there's only 8 activities here, and those are the only activities that are supported right now by our LMS and that have also been approved by our governance team. Our learning management system, Saba Cloud, can only allow certain activities for it. Example of an activity that's fairly popular these days is to have the learner identify and curate content. Our version of Saba doesn't allow this, but the Edcast platform, one of our other LMSs, actually does. Now, in terms of governance, any experiential activity in our toolkit has to be reviewed and approved by our Education Services Governance Board and our Quality Board. The fun of large corporations, having policies and procedures that we have to go out and follow. So there's probably plenty of experiential learning methodologies that you've used in your instructional design or training endeavors. If you spend a little bit of time, I bet you can think up of lots of experiential learning activities, more than just the 8 we shared. You'll probably come up with 10 or 50 or even more than that. If you want kind of a hint or tip and trick on how to go about choosing from the pool, there's something a little bit off topic that I love to share. Is what's called learning battle cards. We don't use them at Dell yet, but we're definitely trying to get there. They're my shiny ball these days. So learning battle cards, you see a collection of them there in the picture along the left. Each card represents a different learning approach. On the face of the card, the middle picture, is basically an acronym, the name, an icon, and a tag cloud that defines when this methodology is best used. The tag cloud is based upon kind of a wisdom of the crowd. On the back of each card, or the image you see on the right, is additional information about that methodology. You'll see the usability in the 7 windows of instructional design in the top right corner. You'll also find the type of card in the middle, and the 5 characteristics in the form of kind of like power bars. So the authors of Learning Battle Cards, and I have no stock in the company or anything, I think it's kind of cool. They've also created L&D games that L&D groups can play with these cards, and go ahead and create more impactful learning solutions. There's also mirror boards that support it, and a lot more. That's just kind of something that's cool. So you may be wondering how we've gone about training our education services employees on experiential learning. Well, we developed the Modernized Learning badged course in our Dell Learning Studio, or our implementation of the Edcast platform. The badge is part of the team's professional development. So the topics include focusing on the need to know, storytelling, making interactions accessible for learners with differing abilities, how to make your course mobile friendly, things like that. And in case you were wondering, yep, each of those topics contain an experiential component. Well, why wouldn't they? All right, Todd, over to you for the next 2 pillars.
All right. So the next one was the extended reality. So this is like augmented reality, virtual reality, and 3D sims. So this we were starting to look at extended reality when the pandemic hit, and the pandemic really pushed the project forward even quicker. We really wanted to, since we transitioned all to virtual delivery for all of our training, we were looking at how could we incorporate those experiential, those hands-on or virtual hands-on activities in our online courses. So we looked at augmented reality. The use cases, we couldn't really define good use cases, and the ROI wasn't there. So the amount of money it would cost to invest in it, on top of how it could be used by our field service. We had seen ways where they could maybe blow up diagrams on a tablet or a phone. But when we really started talking to the service engineers, they're like, well, I don't want to hold a tablet up when I can just go to a paper that I can print off and I can read a diagram. So we decided that the ROI wasn't there for augmented reality. We looked at virtual reality, and we could definitely see use cases where VR would be handy to teach technicians how to rack and stack, how to build servers, and how to cable them, put the right cables to the right spots. But the cost was still high, and still is. Equipment is a barrier, having to ship the equipment around to different locations. But also the cost of the equipment, it was still a little high. But we have defined the way we could use it and what we would like to do with it. So we're keeping our eye on it and just waiting for some of the costs to come down, and for the equipment to also become smaller and less cumbersome. What we ended up settling on were 3D sims, or 3D simulations. So the reason we did this, it was low barrier to entry. As far as the software to create these and what we would need for our users to be able to utilize them, we had what we needed. It's basically a computer, a desktop. You could even do it on a mobile phone. What we do is we would create these simulations. In the slide, it's an example of one of our simulations. You see the disembodied hand, and in this example, we're replacing a broken down server blade. And so this would be something that you would see on your desktop in your training, and you would move your mouse around, and that would control the hand, just like sort of in a VR environment where you'd be using your hands to move it. In this case, you're using your mouse and you're dragging stuff around, and you can move the objects around to get a better view. So this has been well received. A lot of our teams like this. And the nice thing about the 3D simulations is the same files that we use to create the simulations, we can later take those into an augmented, if we want to go augmented, or into a virtual environment and build off of those files. So we've already sort of done the first steps of development if we do decide to go down that path. All right, next one. So the next one was personalized. So I talked a little bit about this already, but we ended up getting the Edcast platform, and this became our home and the one-stop shop for all of our informal learning resources. So if we went and found like an infographic that was pretty informative, and we wanted to share that with others, we could create a card in the Edcast platform. We call it in Dell, our internal name is Learning Studio. So within Learning Studio, you could create a card and it would have a link to that resource, or maybe it's a YouTube video that you found, or it could be a white paper or a website. So you create these cards, and all employees have access to be able to create these cards. Another nice thing is you can put these cards into, you can create your own learning paths. And in the example, you may be able to see it over to the left of that. I've got my learning paths there that I've created. And then you can put these cards into them and build your own paths. You can also share these paths with your managers. Managers can create these informal learning paths if they want, and can assign those out to their staff. The nice thing about the platform is it gives us that ability to have some of that pure learning where you're able to find resources and share them with your peers. You can leave comments, talk about what you like, maybe what you didn't like. So you have the ability to rate these resources. And so through the wisdom of the crowds, hopefully all the stuff that's rated high bubbles up to the surface where people can find them. So the next one was, it's also personalized. This was the skill assessment piece that I was talking about. So this is done in a platform called Workday. And so what we were able to do is managers were able to have a set of skills that they could evaluate their team members on. So we would get an email from our managers, and it would have these different skills that we could rate ourselves on, either whether we didn't feel competent in it, or we felt extremely competent, or maybe adequate. And so if we didn't feel adequate or incompetent, that was an opportunity for our managers to realize, okay, maybe there's some learning opportunities for this employee. If we felt we were competent, or maybe we're an expert in that skill, that was an opportunity to identify these people as people that could be potential mentors or coaching for other employees. We also looked at personalized as far as like skill assessment in the trainings that we created. Some of the trainings that we took ourselves, we had seen this where you would have a long training. It would look like a long training, but you do the skill assessment up front, and that would let you skip through a lot of that training that wasn't necessary, that you could basically test out of. And so we thought, oh, this is a great idea. Let's do this in our own trainings. So we piloted this in across a couple different teams where we have the learner do this little pre-assessment up front, the skill assessment, and then based on the results, they're able to skip to sections that they need to take and not have to take other sections that they tested well on. All right, so the next one is next gen. We call this next generation curation. It's basically curation. So the idea was, how could we help our developers find resources that they could use so they didn't have to start from scratch every single time and reinvent the wheel? So we wanted to create a searchable catalog, like a database, an online database, where our development teams could add the resources that they use and then be able to share that. Other development teams could come into this catalog and see what other development teams. So this helped break down the silos and helped with collaboration. But it also helped speed up the development times because we now were able to find resources that we could use instead of, in some cases, we didn't even have to create a new training because we could use some content that was already used, or we could reuse content that had been developed for another course, but we could then copy that content and use that in the new course that we were trying to create. So the whole idea was to save time and to just give our development teams access or purview into what resources are out there.
As I mentioned earlier, Dell is a metrics-driven company, sometimes to a fault. So here on the screen are the metrics and how will they change with the implementation of modernized learning here at Dell. As it turns out, measuring any change besides Kirkpatrick level 1 is actually tough. We don't have any direct metrics, but we do have some indicating metrics that show improvements. So let's actually go take a look at those now. So here are some of the indirect measurements for some, but not all of the pillars. The first row you see, the active or advanced digital learning, it answers the question, does the course have an experiential component for each topic? As you can see, we're just falling short of our goal of 80% of all new and major course updates. Up until this quarter, minor updates to courses, such as fixing a broken link or updating a screenshot, didn't require for us to add an interactive component. We actually should be reaching the goal this quarter. The main issue we're having is to completely refactor an old course using TBL, and adding interactivity takes time and resources. If you look at our catalog, we have over 38,000 pieces of training that Education Services is responsible for. You may ask why we're not shooting for 100% of our courses to have that experiential component. Well, some of the content we produce is not an official like e-learning training course and hence doesn't need to have an interactive component. Examples are what we call SPRs or single page references. You can think of them as a PDF job aid. There's also assessments and knowledge transfers where our engineers do a brain dump about a certain feature. These today follow the same publishing process as our typical training courses, but our reporting system can't distinguish the difference, hence the 80% goal instead of 100%. For the first row in the lag column, you see that we're just at our goal of 95% CSAT. Yeah, you read that right. Our goal that we work on is 95% of the satisfaction numbers. Looking at the learner's comments and entering course improvement tasks into our product backlog is an area myself and other product owners spend a lot of time. The second row is TBL, or topic-based learning, and today all courses have to be done using the TBL format. So it's a requirement to publish a course today, so the 100% is easy to maintain. Our on-time percentage, the lag indicator, is how many of our courses are published by our promise dates to our stakeholders. Third row is quality management. These numbers come from our content creation system called Acrolinks. And we've set up extensive rules that are used to score the content that our developers create. Each area has a minimum score that must be met. And the score you see there is an aggregate of the scores from all of those areas across all of the courses that were published. One other number that's not on here, but comes from our Domo dashboard, is 81% of our courses are considered mobile friendly. I know you're going to ask probably next is what percentage of our courses are consumed on mobile devices? Remember that blank slide? Well, at present, we don't report on that number because we cannot track which types of devices people are using to consume our content. So, quality audits, quality standards, governance, where would a company be without all of these? Dell definitely is not an exception. While our development teams began creating smaller topic-based learnings, we realized that the consistency and the quality of those courses was falling short. Education Services, as a team, was looking for optimization through standardization, but it was soon observed that without the quality checks and governance in place, all these new TBL courses lacked a consistent look and feel and weren't really the best experience for our customer. If we started reusing multiple modules that had a different look and feel, it didn't really put the best light on Education Services. Our development teams were committing to quick turnaround and meeting tight deadlines, but ended up publishing kind of subpar content. So to address these quality issues, a rigorous quality checklist, which you see on the screen, was created that all courses have to pass before being published. A governance structure was also put into place to create a quality standards committee. The committee is a representative body of developers from across the whole training organization. And the committee helps to set the policies around the quality content created and then helps address any quality issues that come up. Remember all those rules I mentioned that are in Acrolinks? Well, those are owned, in addition to the manual checklist, by the quality team. The quality team members also conduct audits quarterly and work with the peers to remediate or fix any quality issues that are found through both upskilling, mentoring, and coaching opportunities. The checklist you see here, you probably may notice there's tabs at the bottom. This is in Excel. And the columns show that we have the checks supporting, each column shows that there's a check supporting link to information on what that check is. A status column that's filled out by the reviewer, spaces for reviewer comments, rubrics, and so on and so forth. Each course goes through 4 levels of review and approval before publishing. First, the developer has to walk through it, and then a peer reviewer by another developer has to do it, and then myself or another product owner has to look at the content. And last but not least, the development manager has to look at the content and approve it. And all 4 levels must pass the content before it can be published. All right, Todd, over to you for the lessons learned.
All right. So the first lesson learned was pilot first. Definitely, if you're doing something like this, you want to test stuff out in small groups. Even if it's not at this large scale, it's always nice if you can test something out in a smaller setting. That way, if something goes sideways, it's a lot easier to correct and get back on track than if you launch it to the larger organization. So definitely pilot first. Next one was around data-driven decisions. So at Dell, like Bruce has said, we're data-driven to a fault. And we really had to look at how we could define success for this initiative, but also show that we had made progress towards our goals. So we really looked at data and looked at how we could capture data, how we could report out on data, how we could create dashboards on data so different teams could see what was going on and could see that progression. It also helped us identify directions to go. So a lot of decisions before were made on hunches or, this sounds good. Maybe let's try this or let's try that. But that ended up, what we found is it wasn't always the best solution and often created costly mistakes. So the data really helped us look at patterns and maybe identify directions that we hadn't initially seen and pointed us in the right direction. So definitely on your initiatives, try to define data or find data that can help you decide the direction to go, but then also to help you show success in movement in your project. Next one was iterative development. So this was really a part of the Agile, move to that Agile development process, and also just an Agile mindset. So this is by iterative development, we're able to drip content out to our customers sooner than if they had to wait. A lot of projects before, training projects would take maybe 4 months, 5 months to develop, and then would ship. With iterative development in Agile, we're able to ship stuff out in about a month, and then create smaller release cycles where we can drip more content out. So this provides more value to our customers because they're now able to access the stuff that they really need right away first. And then we're able to get them the other content that maybe is not right up at the top of their list of importance, but can come down the list. We were able to get that out later. So it's really helped us be able to provide value to our customers. Next one was change takes time. And this was one where when we first started the initiative, and the first initiative in the Modernized Learning was topic-based learning, we thought that would take maybe about a year and a half the most. We're still doing this 3 years later, I think, parts of it. But what we found was a lot of this change takes time. We had pushback from our teams. Change, a lot of people don't like change, especially if they're comfortable with a way of doing things. It can really rub them. They don't like it. So we really had to stretch out how long these initiatives took and plan for longer periods. A lot of stuff, at least around Dell, is time boxed around the fiscal year. And what we found is we would be in the middle of these initiatives, and then by the end of that fiscal year, the new fiscal year would start, and these new initiatives would come down from top. And those would be the new shiny objects, and we'd lose traction on some of the stuff that we had been working on, and we're slowly plugging away. So we've learned that change is going to take time, and to really stretch these projects out and plan over a multi-year period. We also found that what helped was explaining the why. So here's a plug for Simon Sinek and his book, Start With Why. Great book, and it really helped us really focus on why we were doing what we were doing, and being able to explain that to our employees and really get them to understand the reasons behind what we were doing. So if you guys take these 4 lessons learned, our mistakes, learn from our mistakes, and use these, I think you're really going to set yourself up for success in the future.
So yeah, this is some information on some of the downloads. We'll go into the links are also in chat, but also there's our contact information here, how to go about reaching us through LinkedIn or through our emails. We love having conversations, whether you want to talk shop, you want a copy of the slides, if you're not able to get them off the conference website. I guess Christine had shared that they were sent out in a zip file before the conference, but also maybe sent afterwards. But yeah, are there any questions that folks have? Let's try and take care of the ones that are there in chat. But we'll go leave the slide up. Let's go take a look at our survey results. And of course, this is live, so who knows what's going to happen. Oh, just still the one response. Okay, that's fine. Nothing interesting there then. So are there any questions in the room? If not, we'll call it a wrap. Thank everyone for showing up, both online and in person. I've been having fun at the conference. Hopefully everyone else is. But again, if you have any questions or anything in the future, feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing your presentation. It was really cool. I learned a lot watching it.
Thanks. It was a success then.
Yeah.